Okay.
Here we are.
I am with SDW Hamilton. Is she called Shannon, right?
Shannon, yeah. Shannon. SDW is a bit of a mouthful, so we'll go with Shannon.
Would you like to start us off with an intro to you and your books?
Yeah, certainly. Like I said there, my name's Shannon. I've written 2 books so far. The latest one, entitled He Calls by Night, was just published yesterday. It's the second in a series following a private investigator in Belfast called Jacob Kincaid, who teams up with a mystery podcaster to solve various mysteries around Belfast and Northern Ireland. She's called Natalie Amato, and yeah, like I said, this is the second in the series, and with hopefully more to come.
And it's quite an interesting series, isn't it? Because like you've got the aspect of the podcast, which is, I was going to say quite unusual, but there are a couple of podcast kind of crime novels now, isn't there? But it's still a sort of slightly unusual aspect.
Yeah, I'm actually not quite sure where the inspiration to include a podcast came from. Maybe just looking for something a bit different in terms of like an investigator that I could team up with Jacob. But it's a fun combination of private investigator and podcaster, and it seems to work well so far with the 2 novels.
Yeah, I'm excited to see how it develops in book 2. I've not got all the way into that yet. I read book 1 in preparation, but book 2's only just come out, hasn't it?
Yeah, so the first book, Blood the Broadcast, came out last February, and it's a kind of a locked room mystery involving a cult and a few other interesting things. And then the new book can be read as a standalone or can be read as part of the series.
Does it? I was going to say, it's like you wrap up like the core story, don't you, in Blood on the Broadcast, and set up this new one because they're going to have a slightly different relationship moving forward. Do you carry on some of the sort of threads that aren't completely solved? Because I feel like there's bits at the end of Blood on the Broadcast that you could still tell us more about.
No, to be honest, there's maybe a reference to some things that didn't get wrapped up in Blood on the Broadcast, but the new book He Calls by Night is sort of its own story. But it's I think it's like a continuation of the relationship between Jacob and Natalie, and seeing how that develops, and the relationship between Jacob and the other characters that we meet, such as Helen, his business manager, and Natalie's son Dylan. So maybe not any story strands, but some relationship strands carry on through to the second book.
Helen is one of the like undersung heroes of that book, isn't she? I feel like we need to learn a lot more about Helen.
Yeah, I hear that.
Potential.
I hear that quite a lot from people who've read the first book and the second book. They like tell us more about Helen. So you're trying to strike the balance between keeping people intrigued, but then not holding back too much either. And there's a few things like that throughout the books. A lot of people talk about Jacob as a former police officer, and we find out that he left the job a number of years ago, and he's still lamenting the loss of the job. We never quite, as of yet, find out why. It's just referenced, but it's something that I think as the story moves along, it will come out with a few other threads that I'm trying to build.
You could always, if you don't do it in the main story, you could always do like some of the authors like Ben Aranovich and things do, where they have like a little novella or a short story about from like one of the side characters kind of point of views.
Well, yeah, that's actually something I'm exploring at the minute. I didn't want to jump into another novel straight away, so I've started writing a few short stories featuring Jacob and Natalie, a few other side characters. So they're in development at the minute. I've finished one, kind of like almost an origin story between Jacob and Helen, how they first met, which is on my Substack, and there's at least 4 or 5 others in the works, so I'm not quite sure where they're getting published, if they're going to Substack maybe like a novella collection, but it's certainly a fun exercise, if nothing else, to like write the characters, kind of practice your craft almost without almost the pressure of having to get into novel form.
What inspired you to get into writing the crime novels? Is Blood on the Broadcast your first book?
Blood on the Broadcast was my first book. Yeah, I'm not quite sure what got me into it. I was never a lover of writing in school. I was always a big reader, but in school and such, I was never into creative writing in any fashion. How I got into writing is probably like a kind of a longish story. As you can probably tell behind me, I'm kind of a nerd. And there's this video game series called Mass Effect, and at the time it was a trilogy. And when the trilogy ended, I was somewhat, bereft that I wouldn't get to explore that universe anymore. I stumbled upon a group who were doing a writing in that universe, creating their own stories and such. And that was kind of the first writing I did as a creative outlet, and I found out I was okay at it. And it sort of continued from there, just like online creative writing with a group of people, and that kind of led on to doing some short stories, some flash fiction. And then probably 3 years ago, I decided to try and actually get a novel down, and that's where Blood on the Broadcast came from. And crime's sort of what I know. It's the area I work in, so it seemed crime fiction seemed the obvious choice to base myself in.
If it's the area you work in, how important do you think it is to get the facts right?
Yeah, very important. Without going into too much detail about what I do, I've always been quite keen to be realistic with, say, like interactions with the police and things like that there. So, like, for example, certain things you'd see maybe like a character would ask somebody in the police to look up information for him. I know you can't do that, so I kind of something I would shy away from doing, if that makes sense. But at the same time, you have to kind of balance that with you don't overload people with facts and you don't want to get bogged down with too much realism. But I think for people in that area of work, they would recognize there's a certain authenticity to what I write, and a certain realism in how the police act and how other authority figures act.
There was I'm having a kind of an Irish author week because I was talking to Anna McPartlin yesterday. So I'm kind of interested in, she was talking about her books are sort of set in the 80s, I think, and early 90s. She was talking about the sort of difference then in like there not being many women in the forces and things like that. I'm kind of intrigued as to how much, if any, difference there is between like the way that things are done over in Ireland to here.
In terms of the policing and such.
Yeah.
I suspect at the base level, not too much is different. Like we have mostly the same laws as England, pace and such like that there. I guess the big difference in policing is the threat that's faced from certain elements. So all police officers over here are armed, carry personal protection weapons. I guess it's just a certain mindfulness about the areas you work in and such, or locations. On a day-to-day basis, like the stuff you deal with, I imagine there's not too much difference.
Being very distracted by the figures behind you. Have you got Mal Reynolds?
That's right, Mal Reynolds. Yeah, if you name who's behind or beside Mal, I'll be quite impressed. That's a bit of an older figure.
I don't know if I can see it well enough to know if I can name it. But
if anybody remembers Bucky O'Hare from back in the early 90s, that's who that is.
I love that cartoon. We've got some hellos from Leslie and Donna. I'm a big fan of Firefly as well. That's probably why I was distracted.
Yeah, and I love Firefly. I really hate the fact that we only got 13 episodes in the movie. Still not quite. 20 years later, I'm still not quite over that.
There is talk about it coming back, isn't there?
There always seems to be a bit of talk, yeah, about how they could bring it back, animated or otherwise, and yeah, I'd love to see it back.
Only if it was done well, though, I think.
Well, yeah, that's the as we've seen if you're a Star Wars fan as well, some of the new shows, it's kind of the quality in some's substantially different to others.
I'm very badly, for someone who's married to a very big nerd, not a Star Wars fan.
Sorry, say again.
I said, for someone who's married to someone who's very nerdy, I'm very much not a Star Wars fan.
Oh, really? Well,
Yeah.
I'm the nerd in the house. My wife is very much not a nerd of most things. So I'm the collector and such, or was until the kids came along and priorities changed.
No, we're both quite nerdy in my house, but Star Wars is definitely not my.
Not for you.
No, well, I've seen all of them because I've been made to,
Yeah.
but not a fan.
I know my wife endured a few of the films as well, and she said she'd enjoy them, but I think she enjoyed them for my benefit rather than.
This may be a thing. I don't know. Sorry, we should go back to your book.
Oh yeah, I could talk space stuff all day.
So we've got to like it being your first book. What made you decide to go with a private investigator? Because I think that's quite an unusual choice, but a really good one for this story.
Yeah, I like the idea of the freedom a private investigator has, and I like stories featuring private investigators. I basically wrote the book as something I would enjoy to read. Initially the book was actually envisioned as an urban fantasy, first of all, weirdly enough, featuring a private investigator who investigated paranormal activity. And then that idea kind of died like 6 or 7 chapters in, but I stuck with the central mystery and the characters as they were. I'm not, I just yeah, like I said, I just enjoy the freedom that a private investigator has, and I've always just enjoyed that media, from like the old films to now. There's like a nice history of those type of characters from Marlowe to the present day.
I do like how you sort of hid little nods to old kind of private investigator tropes and things like that through the book. Like there's like clear little references, and there, like him having a bottle of whiskey in his drawer and being like, oh, that's a really obvious thing for a private investigator to have, and things like that.
Yeah, I was always wary of leaning too hard into the trope, as it were, like making them like too hard drinking, too world weary. But I think a few little nods are okay, like the bottle of whiskey, like you say, in the desk drawer. I think in the first book, Jacob and Ali talk about a few different tropes, like the jazz music and the whiskey and the shade coming through the blinds and such. Yeah, it's just being wary of going too far into the cliche, I guess.
I think it also brought a bit of lightness to the story as well, though, because I'm sort of joking about that, but it sort of built the relationship between them quite nicely, but also brought a little bit of lightness to the novel.
Yeah, I think that's kind of important too. Again, in my line of work, what I do, you kind of need a bit of sense of humor about you because some of the stuff you deal with is quite dark. So it makes sense for a character like Jacob, who is former police, to try and like inject a bit of levity or a bit of dry humor into certain situations. It helps. I think it helps the reader too. Like it doesn't get too heavy all the time. There's a bit of lightness, and not that the story, especially the first stories, I would say is particularly dark, but it's nice to have that balance between darkness and light.
No, it's not. I mean, it has its moments, doesn't it? But it's not. Mm. It is very much. I think it's almost filmic in how you read it. Like I feel like you could watch it as an episode or a movie and be quite satisfied.
Yeah, if anybody's listening from the BBC or otherwise, you want to pick it up, I think it would make a great series or movie. I'd absolutely agree with that. I guess maybe it's from when I was a bit younger. I always was a bit of a film nerd. I've kind of got out of it now, but perhaps it kind of carried over in terms of almost that structure, like building towards the end with different high points throughout until you reach the end of the story. But yeah, I think it would. I think it'd make a good series, certainly.
But it's quite a pacey read, isn't it? There's always something happening in it. Like you go from, but not at the expense of developing the characters or anything. Because I feel like you get really involved with all the people, but it does feel like it keeps up a nice pace.
Yeah, it was just something to work on. Like you think about having to keep a reader engaged, but also, like you say, kind of build on the characters. It's just trying to find that balance that people want to keep reading because the pace is good, but not at the expense of missing out on who the characters are or what they're developing into. So
Well,
yeah, it's just something to be mindful of.
you have quite an atmospheric opening scene with like the like an armored police car kind of rolling down the street and stopping to talk to like our main character, don't you? And it's just like I think I started reading that and I was like, all right, I'm kind of into this already. Do you know what I mean? Like I'm intrigued to how that's going to go.
Yeah, I think when I wrote that, it set the scene quite nicely. I also think it helped set the location for people who are reading going, oh, it's created maybe like a bit of a different. It's the UK, it's Ireland, but it's also separate. Like you wouldn't get an armored Land Rover rolling down the street at 3 a.m. and in almost any other in any other city in the UK or Ireland. So it's just a nice setup for this is this is your story. This is where we are. Um, yeah, it's a little bit different maybe, but let's see where it goes.
Yeah, because I think even if you see the armed police, like I live in a city, so you do see
Mhm.
armed police and things. But the cars aren't armoured. They'll say that they have arms inside, but they won't be overly any more defended than any other car. If that makes sense.
Yeah, and I think when people come over here, they're maybe still a bit taken back that they can see the policeman on the street with the gun on his hip. Like it is a bit different. Unfortunately, it's the reality of the situation here that it still has to happen. Um, yeah, but like I said, that's Belfast, so that's the set we go with.
Will you keep them investigating in Belfast, or will you? Because the joy of them being a podcast and a private detective is that the investigators they can move around, can't they? You
Yeah, yeah. And in the second book, they do go a bit further afield to a few different locations out in the country, like a bit more rural. Um, Still mainly based in Belfast, but like you say, you have that luxury with a private investigator and a mystery podcaster. They're not tied to any location. Um, so, like, I am quite keen to keep the setting in Northern Ireland because I think that's kind of one of the selling points of the book. But they do go. In the second book. They do go for a bit further afield from the city.
cool. Leslie Field said hello. Donna said hello. Laura says she's going to watch and catch up because she's stuck on. This is sounds quite an adventure. She's stuck on the bus after the driver got lost on her diversion. She's somewhere in Worcestershire on trying to get home. Now that could be. I don't know where Laura lives because that could be a very big diversion or just like a little bit.
Yeah.
But she says she loved book one and has just got book two.
Oh, great! Thank you, Laura. Hope you enjoy. I believe Laura left actually a very nice review for book one on Goodreads as well. So much appreciated.
Laura's a really good champion of Irish authors as well. So you want to like if she gets on board with loving it, that's great.
Yeah, yeah. I'll definitely be keeping updated about the next book in the series and such. To just gotta keep the fans on side definitely.
Well, I think that's the thing because before we started the group and sort of got to know people like Philip and James, I don't think I knew that many people who were writing books, set in either Northern Ireland or over the border at all. And now there's quite a few that I would read. So it's
Yeah,
kind of a thing, isn't it, that you're sort of discovering.
yeah. Like a group like that is great. I think there's some local authors that I hadn't heard about, but through groups like this here, you do get to hear about like other people reading the books and recommending them. And yeah, as an author, like groups like this here are a fantastic resource to get in contact with people. And I find like the community online is just an extremely supportive one, local and international. Just just a positive group of people who will help out and will support. and in turn, any support you can offer, it's gladly given because of that.
Do you have any kind of book events coming up, like in real life?
No, I don't. Real life, the writing's going to probably take a bit of a backseat here shortly because we're expecting our third child come December. So I might get a few short stories out, but come December, my attention probably will be mostly elsewhere for a couple months. After that, it's back into writing the next novel. And in terms of events, I'll have to keep an eye out. I'm still like, as an indie author, I'm still kind of finding my feet in terms of best ways to promote myself and such. So, as I said before this interview started, this is the first interview I've ever did. I've never given a talk. I've never appeared at a book event before, so it's something I'll be looking to explore. But in the meantime, no, my calendar is quite empty for events.
December children are the best.
Yeah, our second child was born last year in December, and he's a handful. But the third's due on Boxing Day, so that might be a wee Christmas baby, which is be very nice.
Yeah, although probably not as exciting for them when their birthday is like really near Christmas.
No, we're saying that. No, I don't know how that works. I'm a June birthday, so I had a nice break between birthdays and Christmas when I was growing up. But don't know how we're going to deal with that going forward. That'll be a conversation for a few years down the line. The best way to make it special for them without overstepping Christmas as well.
Well, there's always an answer. It's quite a thing in our family having birthdays in December and November. It's all winter babies. But so you said as well, you started out writing this one, the first one, as an urban fantasy. Would you ever be tempted to go back and write that genre?
Yeah, possibly, but the weird thing is I don't really read urban fantasy, so I don't know what possessed me to try and write urban fantasy in the first place. I think I just had the idea that it would be quite fun to write like a detective in Ireland who investigates the paranormal while tying in like Irish folklore and such. But as I progressed, I kind of really got into the whole investigative mindset that Jacob had, and I just kind of wanted to kind of pursue that with like logical explanations to what he was investigating. So as the story went on, the paranormal was scaled back and was eventually done away with altogether. The idea of the first book was always a locked room, but then once I decided to do away with the urban fantasy, I was left with the problem of actually, have to solve this locked room problem now, because you can't just say it was ghosts. So that was a challenge. Like I had the book more or less written before I actually had the solution to the locked room. A bit of a eureka moment when I finally got it, thankfully. But yeah, I'd always be open to writing in other genres. I have tried to write like space opera before when I was younger. But at the minute, crime is kind of the writing passion.
Locked rooms are kind of one of the classics of crime fiction, aren't they? I think twinned with having a detective makes it, you're kind of hitting all the peak sort of golden age bits of crime, aren't you? Like a private investigator in the locked room.
Yeah, it is sort of hitting some of the tropes. But again, I hadn't read a lot of locked room mysteries before I started writing this book either, so I didn't have too much to go on. Adrian McKenty, who is a Northern Irish author, has wrote a couple of locked room mysteries in his Duffy books. But aside from that, there and an old Sherlock Holmes book, or actually wasn't a book, it was a short story. I don't think I've actually read too many other locked rooms. So if there's any aficionados out there, they might turn their nose up at what I wrote. But the feedback I generally got was like the solution seemed to work for most people who read it, so I'll take that.
No, it's a really clever one. I like the odd one. One of my favorites is not a traditional one. It's Chris. There's an author called Chris Beck, and he wrote a sort of crime novel based on a trawler on the North Sea. So it's like a locked room because it's all on the trawler.
Oh, that's actually a really good location. I love
That
that.
was really clever.
Yeah.
I think like an unusual twist.
Yeah, there was a show I watched recently about an oil rig on the North Sea, and it was quite atmospheric too. So it was just like, yeah, you can't get much more atmospheric than like isolated on the North Sea or in the Atlantic Ocean.
Yeah, he was. Yeah, I read another really good one that was set on like a railway station in Norway, and it's like the highest above sea level in like Europe, I think, and they got snowed in there, and then there was like a crime. That was
Yeah,
pretty good.
crime.
And
Yeah,
you need a bit of atmosphere for your lock screen, don't you?
yeah. I'll maybe have to look for locations around here and try maybe top that next time. See if I can find somewhere else equally atmospheric. Oh, again, it's hard to top a mountain in Norway, I'd imagine, or up in the North Sea.
What's the premise for book two then? So you're going to go away from doing locked rooms, obviously. No, you've done
Yeah,
that one.
I didn't want to chance more the second time around. So the premise of the second book, Jacob's basically approached by an elderly woman who wants him to look into the disappearance of her son 40 years ago. He was in a borstal, and the last time she saw him, he told her a name, Ned by Night, which is an old, obscure, parochial urban legend that's not really known. So Jacob brings Natalie aboard, hoping that she can, aid in her investigative prowess. But as they look into the story, they find out that the missing boy was one of several missing boys, and indeed, as they dig further, they find out there's also a string of missing girls around the same time period. So they basically try and delve into that with what little information they have based on this name of this urban legend. And as the story progresses, they're approached by a new character, Zara Steele, who's the head of the cold case unit in the PSNI, and they also recruit a former detective who investigated the missing girls from all those years before. And together they try to dig down and try to find the truth of what happened.
Which sounds like it's going to be a cracking. Can't wait to get into it. I'll be on my Kindle. It's because I was so hooked by the first one. I'm definitely going to be reading everything you write. You've got some comments from James and Philip.
Hi guys.
Phil says, "Best of luck with the new release."
Thank you, Philip.
Is it going well? So it came out yesterday. How's the reception to it going? Have you got some reviews coming in?
Yeah. I've had reviews coming in. I had since maybe the month before with ARC readers and such. Generally, the reception's been quite positive. I think I've hit 20 reviews on Goodreads by today. All very generous feedback and very kind words. So far, the reception seems to be very positive, which is amazing. Now it's just a kind of a matter of trying to get it out there a bit more and hopefully get a few more eyes on it as much as I can.
Do you have an idea how many books you'd write in this series?
Well, no, not really, because at the minimum, I'd like to make it a trilogy, but I feel like the characters at the minute they're not they're not short to write, they're not boring. I feel there's a lot of potential there with the dynamic they have, their own relationships, and just the setting as a whole. I think you could probably have quite a few books out there. I would just be again wary of maybe leaning on too much that it becomes a bit boring or trite. But at the minute, I feel like there's quite a bit of potential to just expand it or extend it for quite a few books.
Yeah, I think you could get a few different stories because you've got such a wider sort of range of sort of secondary characters as well that can kind of carry bits of the story for you. So even if you wanted to take the focus away from Natalie and Jacob a bit, you could have Helen come into the fore. You could have someone else.
Yeah, I think there's quite a strong cast of like secondary characters. Like you mentioned Helen. I think there's a lot of potential with Jacob's uncle, who's an ex PSNI detective back in the bad old days. Harry, who's we only meet briefly in both books, but he's quite an interesting character. Jacob's best friend, who's still in the Force.
I was
There's
just
certainly
him. He'd be great.
who, Michael or Harry?
Yeah. His friend is in the Force. Michael.
Yeah. If ever wanted to base like a story in the police, I guess he could be very much the focal point. Because he's certainly he's a fun character. He's a fun foil for Jacob and the interactions they have.
And he kind of helps Jacob out, doesn't he? Because there's a few moments in the book, without giving away spoilers, where, you know, he needs to have like a friend like Michael to help him.
Yeah, I've never enjoyed in books or other media about like the guy who's like unflappable and infallible. I like the fact that the Jacob's somebody who can take care of himself. He's not above getting beat up or roughed around or outsmarted. And at times he does have to rely on friends like Natalie bails him out of situations. Michael helps him out. Helen helps him out. I think it's an interesting character point that he does get a bit of a shellacking now and again, but he keeps going. He's got that cast that he can rely on to get him through.
Philip says he thinks that the NI Private Eye is very clever.
Thank you, Philip.
There's a lot to unpack with history and contemporary issues that could directly conflict with lots of future books.
I agree. Like at the risk of like maybe leaning too much into the past, but at the same time, I think there's there's strong potential from the history and from, like you said, the conflict that's evolved and the tensions that still are ongoing. I think Northern Ireland has a unique setting, and I think it. Yeah, I think there's so much potential and places you can go with our past, our future, and all sorts.
Yeah, we've me and Philip have talked about this before, but there's a point sometimes where you don't want to reflect on those. It's like how much you want to go into sort of the troubles and parts of the past and things to explore it, and how much you sort of, are there like issues that you wouldn't want to explore, really?
No, I don't think there's anything I would avoid, but I think it's a matter of if you're dealing with situations, you deal with them sensitively, you deal with them, but like you deal with them honestly as well. I think the first book was quite keen to avoid mentions of the past, just because a lot of stuff in Northern Ireland, especially on TV and movies, it does reflect on the past, and the place is more than that at the same time. But at the same time, you have to kind of acknowledge where we've been, what we came through, and where we are now.
So we talked about that. You talked about revealing what happened, because Jacob's got a sort of interesting relationship with the police, hasn't he? Because we don't know why he's left yet in the book, and he has various interactions with them that makes you think that he left maybe not in the best way, because sometimes they're a bit like, oh, you're that person.
Yeah, I think from what we've seen, I think police officers in the job know his name and know what happened, or at least some of them who were around at the time are aware. It's kind of fun to tease that out. At some point, obviously, the reveal will come, but I think it's part of the fun of writing a series where you can have a plot point and you don't wrap it up by book one. You can tease it through book two and book three and onwards. The truth will come out, or the story will come out at some point, I'm sure. But like I said, that and things like Helen's background and such are fun to tease without going into the full story just yet.
Yeah, because I guess we're going to get more of Nicole's background as well, because she sort of comes into it and we know a bit about her, but we just don't have the full story for her either, do we? Like,
no. I mean, we know Natalie was a reporter in London and has come back and has built up quite a successful podcast, but there's also references to her past as well. We know she's a widow. She has a son. So yeah, the full story on Natalie hasn't been revealed either, I guess. So yeah, it's just part of the fun of writing it, that you can develop the characters as you go, and you can add a little bit here and there, and paint their background as you progress the series, really.
I think it's also a testament to how well you've written it, though, as well. Because if you hadn't have written it as well and as deeply, we wouldn't be sat here talking about the fact that you could have so many of these characters and their stories coming out in future things. Do you know what I mean? You've developed that depth and richness there for us to think about.
It's something I've always enjoyed, as weird as it is, like a cast of characters, not just focused on the main characters. I like a strong secondary cast. So to go back to a sci-fi reference, the old Battlestar Galactica show, or the newer Battlestar Galactica show, had like your main characters, but a very strong secondary cast who could drop in and out as the series progressed, and could support the story, and at times became the focus of certain stories. So it's just something I've always been interested in. I always kind of enjoy shows more that have characters that feel lived in, and aren't just there for the protagonist to get like a smart word on, or beat up, or exist in the background, if that makes sense.
Yeah, no, you're 100%. It's exactly the kind of fiction I want to read, where there's like a lot of characters and they're really well developed and really believable people, because I think that's what's interesting. You could have gone the way with Jacob and the others as PI, where he's just kind of quite tough and can do all of these things, but he has moments where he needs, like you said, he needs to have help, or he's not quite going to get out unscathed, and that makes him more real.
Yeah, and I think that's also been fun to write, like Jacob's vulnerabilities. He's, without leaning into tropes about the hard drinking private investigator, we see Jacob struggle with other matters. Like he overeats, for example. He doubts himself. He's often feels lonely and isolated. So yeah, it's just exploring what makes an interesting character for me. And although I like the old trope of the private investigator, I just want to try something a bit different. I think a character I can relate to as I write him, and I think it's a character that the readers can relate to too. People seem to kind of side with Jacob, that kind of somebody they can get behind.
And I think as he goes through, it's going to get more interesting, because he sort of was doing like the I guess you would call boring cases, isn't he, at the beginning, like, cheating husband.
Yeah.
Until he gets drawn into a lot of mystery, and now he's done that, you feel like he's going to get drawn into more interesting cases, because he's sort of building that reputation for himself.
Yeah, that's something I kind of wanted to build on. When we first meet Jake in the first book, although he's reasonably successful, he's unfulfilled. He's not happy in his work. He's tired of chasing benefit cheats and cheating spouses and things like that there. So the first book, he gets this opportunity to dive into a case that he can really get into. It's like a case that matters to him. But as we go into the second book, the kind of reality almost sets back in that not every case is going to be quite like that. He's maybe going back into the world that he was in before, until this case comes along. But as you say, as we go along, the reputation builds. More interesting cases may fall in his lap.
He's also still got the added interest now of the podcast as well, hasn't he? Because I'm presuming in book 2 he's doing more of the sort of podcast with, and things like that we were getting introduced to in book 1 that hadn't really come to the fore.
Yeah, so his idea in bringing Natalie in book 2 is to kind of bring her in to get her story so she can work with him. we don't go into too much of the podcast side in book 2 in terms of an actual recording of a show or such. We find out that unfortunately a kibosh has been put on the story from book 1 for reasons that are explained in the book. But again, going forward, there will be a podcast element there where the stories might come from Natalie, from her Miss Gumshoe show. It's like, again, it's just an element that's open to explore, and I think it'll be quite interesting to take it forward for the next book or books after that.
Have you thought about making some sort of pretend episodes of the Miss Gumshoe show that people could listen to? That'd be a good one.
That would be a good. It would actually be an interesting idea. It'd be an interesting creative outlet. I would need to find a suitable actress first of all, but it could actually be quite a fun wee idea. I don't think I'm the one to take it forward. I had quite a bit of trouble setting up this webcam just for this interview, so I need to avoid someone else's knowledge on the matter in terms of how actually to record a show. But yeah, it'd be a fun wee experiment, if nothing else.
So there you go. I've given you a free marketing idea.
Yeah. I'll credit you when it takes place.
When it comes out.
Yeah, exactly.
I'll get to listen to it. That'd be fun. I've actually never listened to a crime podcast.
I haven't listened to many crime podcasts either. I think it was, I don't know if you've ever listened to the Lovecraft Investigations, the podcast on BBC Radio 4. It was out a few years ago. I think I might be listening to that at the time when maybe the idea hit me to like go with the podcast idea. But no, when I listen to audio, it's books usually. I wouldn't listen to many podcasts myself.
I don't listen to audio books either. It's really bad.
No, it's something I just got into probably in the last year or so. It's to put on when I'm in the car, when I'm doing chores around the house or something. I can't believe it's took me so long to get into them because there's some great audiobooks out there.
Do you have audio versions of your books?
I don't as of yet. The cost is the cost to do it properly is an issue. The cost versus making the money back. It's something I would like to do certainly, and I think it would be quite a fun accompaniment to the books to actually have an audio outlet as well. But at the minute, no, it's just Kindle and paperback, unfortunately.
I mean, that's still great. Like, it's not. I guess when you're independent, it's a bit harder to get sort of some of the other bits out there.
Yeah, and I'm sure there's ways to maybe do it for that are less cost prohibitive, but at the same time, I think I'd be quite keen just to keep the quality to a certain standard. So it's certainly not something I'd rule out, but at the meantime, no, the text is the way I'm going.
So when your pretend Miss Gumshoe podcast takes off and Netflix and the BBC come calling to film your TV show, what character would you like to play?
I think I'd make a good when we first start Blood in the Broadcast. The Jacob meets two police officers in the armored car, and one's new and one's a bit older, and I've seen a few things. I think I'd play him quite convincingly. Small part, not many lines. Move on.
Would you want to? You could also go for a bit of a Hitchcock moment and then just reappear as a policeman in every.
Yeah, or start off and like explain the locked room at the very start. I think he does. I think that's Psycho. He does that, is it? Where he walks into the room and talks about the murder. Do we cameo like that there? Yeah.
I mean, the locked room solution is really clever as well. How did you come? Well, you can't ask. No, sorry.
Well, I don't think we talked about the solution, which because it was kind of interesting. Like I said, I didn't have a solution. I was kind of a chapter 2 out without a solution that was satisfactory, and then it was the night before my daughter was born, our first child. I was in bed because I thought I was due work next day, and my wife woke me up and said, "We're due at the hospital tomorrow at 6." And I was like, 6 p.m. She's like, "No, 6 a.m." I was like, "Oh." And then woken up with the news that your first child's been born in a few hours. It kind of there's not much chance of going back to sleep, so I kind of just lay in bed and thought on the mystery, and then I had the eureka moment about 3 a.m. that morning. It just clicked for whatever reason. The pieces finally fit, and I was like, oh, "This is how I can make this work." I'll go back, edit this, change that, and then I have a solution that's acceptable.
It is, and you kind of are trying. It's so clever because you're trying to work it out. Knowing that, and then you came up with it so late is amazing. Because as you're going through, you're trying to figure it out, and every time I thought I'd figured it out, I was wrong.
Yeah, I think if there's anybody else looking to write a locked room mystery, I wouldn't recommend it, because there's definitely times I was just staring at the screen thinking, what have I done here? I've wrote myself into a corner about 80,000 words in. Thankfully, the moment came where I was able to go, okay, I can bring this to a close.
Was the second one a bit easier to get through then? Did you know the solution to that when you started, or?
I did. I kind of had the I kind of had the main ending sorted, but it was kind of a different challenge in book 2, where it became more of a challenge of trying to get from start to end. Whereas the first book, I just went start, and I flew through it. For whatever reason, I think possibly just from a slight bit of pressure after writing the book. You want to match the quality. You want to keep the characters true to who they were, to where they're going. So it was maybe a bit more of a intensive writing just to get through it. So the ending wasn't really an issue. I knew how to get there. It's just a matter of how long it took me, and to do in a way that I found would be satisfactory for people who read the books.
It will be, I'm sure. I have high faith. I think if the first book is your first novel, then the quality is going to be excellent as you carry on.
Oh, thank you.
Because quality of the first book is really good. What have you read recently and enjoyed?
I just finished Michael Connelly's latest book, Nightshade. I'm a huge Michael Connelly fan. If anybody out there knows the Bosch TV show on Amazon, he's wrote. I think he's been writing since the early '90s with that character, and he's got a few other ones. The Ballard show that's just came out is also based on a few of his novels. So yeah, I'm a huge fan of Michael Connelly. So just finished that, and on audiobook I'm listening to one of the Ken Broom books. He writes the Guard series featuring Jack Taylor. He's also an Irish private investigator. And I can't recall the narrator's name who narrates those books, but he's fantastic, so he is.
Because it'd be important to get kind of the accents and things right, I would imagine, on the audio for like a Northern Irish.
Yeah, and I think a Northern Irish accent's traditionally quite hard to do. If you've watched like Sons of Anarchy or Brad Pitt struggle with it, there's a few big names who've tried and absolutely failed to get it and sounding close to it. So yeah, I think if you're setting an audiobook in Northern Ireland, you need to go native for the narrator.
Is that what's the case with the one that you listen to?
Yeah, the narrator is Irish. It's set in Galway, and I don't know if it's a Galway accent, but you see certainly Irish, and he's I'm really struggling to remember the name, but he's absolutely fantastic at the narration.
I'll have to look it up. I am, like I said, my introduction to sort of Northern Irish crime fiction was Philip and James, so I'm kind of
yes, great starting point. Philip and James are awesome. I just read Philip's latest book a couple months ago, or it was maybe a novella, maybe a more accurate description, but it was very good. And I read James's book a few months ago as well. It was fantastic. Write Me a Murder, I think it was called, for James. Yeah, both great books, and both super supportive guys. Been very helpful from the moment I reached out to say what I do, and they're both quick to give praise and give advice when asked for.
Yeah, they're very supportive of other authors. I think it's an excellent thing. I'm really impressed. They're always championing other voices, which is what you want, isn't it? Like, that's how we discover new writers. We need people to come on and tell us about them.
Yeah, and for any new writer starting out, when I made the decision to publish myself, it was like it's quite a daunting. You probably don't realize. I certainly didn't realize when I started, like, just how much work after writing the book goes into actually trying to get it out there and get eyes on it and such. So anybody that's been there as well to offer advice or offer you a steer, it's so valuable to any new author.
It must be quite hard because, especially if you're working as well. So you're working, you've got another child on the way. Marketing and things must be quite hard to do.
Yeah, it's just about getting using the free time as best you can. Not a lot of time for procrastination if you're trying to balance home life, work life, and writing and releasing a novel. Yeah, I think for any author, I'd say time management's a good skill to have. Yeah, and have a good plan and a schedule and stick to it. Would be my main piece of advice.
What are you like as an author? Are you quite sort of disciplined? Do you have like a really clear plan and things like that?
Yeah, for the first book, I just kind of wrote and seen where it took me. For the second book, I set out the plan and stuck to it quite religiously. There's another book that I've wrote as well, which hasn't been published yet. It's a young adult book. It's not set in Northern Ireland, but I wrote that in between these two books, and I planned it out, and I got through it quite quickly. It was a shorter book; it was only about 50,000 words, but I think it was written in 3 months because I had the plan and I had the schedule, and I knew the beats that was going to hit. And I think that's probably I know that doesn't work for everybody, but I think going forward, that's the way I'll be writing.
I think it's quite hard. I mean, sort of YA and crime in a sense, because they're such big genres. It can be quite hard to break into them and come up with something that makes you stand out and be a bit more unique as well.
Yeah. Yeah, it's like and just being like an independent author or any author, you see the amount of books that go on every day onto Amazon or whatever. It is hard to stand out. So quality, I think, is the main name of the game. You have to have a good idea, have a good pitch, have a good hook, but the writing has to be there as well, and the story and the characters have to be on point, or you'll very quickly get lost in the shuffle. And you're really fighting for every page read almost. You just need to be on it in terms of having a product that people will want to read and will want to come back to.
Yeah, I mean, you are succeeding, I think. You've got Laura saying that she can't wait to delve into book 2.
Yeah.
You've got me, I'll be reading all of them. You're getting nice comments from the other people who've read them. So I think you're definitely there with the quality.
Yeah, and then it's just trying to, I guess, learn the game in terms of getting more eyes on and such, marketing. And it's very much, for me, it's very much learning as you go in terms of marketing and promotion. And, there's so many avenues you can go down, but, there's so many ways you can get lost. There's so many dead ends. There's so many ways you can just lose the money you put in. So yeah, it's just a matter of kind of learning the craft, I think, as I go forward. And like you said, it's nice to hear that the quality of the books there, and then hopefully the quality of the marketing and such going forward kind of does it justice.
And did you say you'd written a short story as well that's available? You said it was on your Substack. Is that right?
Yeah. So I wrote a short story. It's about, I think it's less than 8,000 words, about Jacob's first case, which is he's hired by Helen, who in the first book and second book, she's his office manager basically. So we find out how they met and really how she comes to work for him. So it's on a Substack, which really good promotion. I can't recall the name of, probably under SDW Hamilton Substack, I think. So yeah, if anybody wants to get like a small origin story of who Jacob was before he had the adventures in book one, I'd recommend you check it out.
We'll share it into the group after the chat when you've got time.
Yeah.
And just say it's with my permission.
Yeah. Okay. Certainly. Yeah. Hopefully, it's enjoyed by a few people. Yeah.
Well, and then people can find it and sort of get a taster, which would be quite nice.
Yeah. See the characters you're going to hopefully go forward with. Yeah. Absolutely.
I'd be intrigued to go and read it, so I'm being selfish and sort of getting you sad so I can find it as well.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Why not?
I definitely want to go and see that about the first case. I think that'd be really entertaining to read.
Yeah, it was fun to write. Just we meet Jacob at a different time in his life. It's about 3 or 4 years before the first book. He's just out of the job and in a different headspace, and it was fun to go back. And there's gonna be a few stories like that, prequels, if you will, just shorter in length, just find out who he was and find out who a few other characters were before we really got to know them.
Which is, it's a really clever way of sort of getting people to get interested. I think that's a really good idea. I think I've asked Philip and some of the others this, but are you tempted to ever share sort of pictures of the locations that you use?
Yeah. Like most of I'm always quite keen to get like an authentic feeling for locations, particularly Belfast, and there's a few locations in this book. In the second book, I should say, that were inspired by like real life locations, like the Borstal, for example, is based on Woodburn House out in Millisle, which is a small village in County Down, Northern Ireland. So yeah, if people were interested, I'd be more than happy to share some locations. I think Northern Ireland has like a particular atmosphere about it, and just the locations that we can show off or talk about are unique.
I think it's a really interesting way for people to learn about things as well. I think the thing that people like about sort of regional writing and stuff is that you sort of learn about new locations and places. So I think it'd be really good if you did.
Yeah, and I think a lot of people talk about that, and when they've read, especially the first book, the sense of feeling they get from reading about like the character, like Belfast is almost a character in its own right, with the descriptions and stuff. So it's great to hear, because it's kind of something I wanted to convey, like the setting and the city, because it's not somewhere most people would be too familiar with in terms of written media or other source of media. So it's nice to be able to showcase it.
And then we've got a couple of minutes left, so remind people, especially if you've got the books to show, what they're going to go away and buy.
Yeah, so book one is entitled Blood the Broadcast, featuring private detective Jacob Kincaid as he teams up with mystery podcaster Natalie Amato to solve a locked room murder of one of Natalie's journalist colleagues who was looking into a cult, a New Age cult. So yeah, there's plenty of twists and turns as they try and solve the mystery of the locked room and whether it was a murder. And then it's followed by the book that released yesterday, He Calls by Night, which again features Jacob and Natalie. Jacob's approached by the mother of a boy who went missing 40 years ago from a Borstal. And the last thing the boy said to his mother was the name of this obscure urban legend. So together with Natalie, he looks into the legend and finds out there's been a string of disappearances of children from back in the day. And he just tries to find out the reason why and how it ties into this name this boy was shouting.
Which, yeah, great. I mean, you pull people in with the descriptions. And then all that's left to say is thanks so much for joining us. It's been great. And you would never have told this was your first interview.
Thank you. It's been a lot of fun, and it's just thanks for having me, and I look forward to doing more interviews. I can always say this was my very first one. I can always come back to today.
You're always very welcome back as well.
Thank you very much.